John Schreiner is an internationally acclaimed wine writer who makes a tidy living visiting wineries and profiling the people who create wines. Some with holy names like Church and State, and some with cheeky labels like Mistaken Identity and Neck of the Woods. His new guide focuses on the wineries of the Fraser Valley, Vancouver, Vancouver Island, and the Gulf Islands, and it is my pleasure to welcome John Schreiner back to Studio 4 to sip some more.
Thank you.
Talk about sipping. How about that?
Thank you. Well, after your last segment, I was going to talk about drinking like a fish.
Yes, and we like to do that.
Yes.
Well, but now we spit some out, and it's proper to spit when you're at a wine tasting, right?
I was at a wine tasting recently where I was spitting in a large tasting, and one of the attendees came and looked at me for a while and started to laugh. So obviously, not many people spit.
Okay.
But I think in these days of the severe restrictions on how much you can drink, one should learn to spit and one should not be embarrassed to spit.
Right. Well, if you don't spit, you're blotto.
Yes.
And you have to call the taxi. It's just true, no matter how much wine you drink. You write wine books for the same reason you said in here, for all the same reason, because every winery has a wonderful story.
Yes. I've spent my whole life as a writer telling stories of one sort or the other, and these people are really low-hanging fruit. Some of them they're so colorful.
Well, what surprised me in reading many of the bios that go along with the wineries, there's engineers and accountants and people from all walks of life.
What we got?
Dairy
three
farmers.
Three doctors.
Three doctors.
Yeah.
And there's three couples that came together. Is that Mistaken Identity?
Yes.
And decided, we love wine. Why don't we make wine? Well, or hire someone to make wine. Would that be more accurate?
One of the people in that group, I think it's Ian Baker, is in fact a winemaker.
Okay.
He was a longtime amateur winemaker. Was quite good as an amateur. Won some national awards, and he and his brother, are there four people there? Four couples or three. I'm trying to remember. There's another one has got three. He just started taking that to the professional level.
Sure.
And the same with Starling Lane on the Sandwich Peninsula. There, I can remember clearly there are three couples. The winemaker is actually a radiologist in Royal Victoria Hospital.
Still.
So
Many are still working, but their pleasure is growing grapes and making wine, and of course sipping a little wine. The Mooberry Winery in Parksville, Little Qualicum Cheese Works, as you know, makes fine cheese, and they obviously have cows.
Yes.
So they've decided to make wine, fruit wine. What kind of wine?
You name the fruit and it's there.
Really?
Apricot and blueberry and cranberry and blackberry, and there's a long list of them. About 10 different fruit wines.
And are they called Mooberry wines, or are they called peach, or?
No, they're Mooberry, and then the fruit will be on the label.
Okay. And what's a peach wine like?
The fruit wines taste like the fruit. The challenge that we wine writers have is coming up with descriptors, because of course with grape wines you're always saying, well, it tastes like, Chenin Blanc has a nice crisp apple taste. Right. And recently I was tasting an apple wine and I thought, it tastes like Chenin Blanc.
See? So what's the difference between the wineries in the Okanagan and the coastal wineries? A winery in Langley or a winery in Osoyoos, the kind of wine they produce? Well, the terroir is different.
The terroir, the climate is different. Some of the wineries in the coast and on the islands bring in Okanagan grapes, as well as making wine from the grapes they grow. Others take a very purist attitude that they'll only make wine from grapes that they grow on the island. And I don't have a judgment one way or the other.
Right.
I've tasted excellent wines. The one in Fort Langley, in Abbotsford, the Mount Lehman Winery has his own vineyard, Pinot Noir among other things,
right,
and does an excellent job with it. But he also brings in grapes of one sort or the other from the Okanagan. I know currently he's got a really stunning Viognier.
Ooh.
Now you can't grow Viognier in this climate. Viognier has to get a lot riper than it does in this climate.
But he's growing it in Abbotsford, or he's importing the grape
he's
and
bringing
making
it in from the Okanagan.
Got you.
Yeah, you couldn't grow.
Okay.
You couldn't succeed with Viognier.
Not hot enough.
Not hot enough. And the ones in the Isle, Pinot Gris is a fairly common variety that grows both here. This is a good one to compare. Pinot Gris in the Okanagan, Pinot Gris in the island. It's a lot crisper and perhaps a bit tartar because the sugars don't get as high and the acids don't drop.
Okay, and some of it has a little blush in it. I've seen some, I know Nickel in the Okanagan has a little blush. And doesn't Alderley, is it Alderley that has a little blush in the Pinot Gris?
Very likely. Pinot Gris grapes have a little bit of color in the skins.
Okay, it's probably not blush, it's color.
Well, if you leave
it's a little pinky.
Yeah, if you leave the juice on the skins for a while, it'll bring out some blue color, some pink
Well,
color.
really lovely. Patio wine, all of that. The meaderies. Mead. We're making mead. It's like, what's mead really? It's an arcane art, I know. You read about it in ancient books.
There are 3 meaderies in the book, and there's the Tugwell Creek Farm, and it's Souk, which is the first one, and Middle Mountain Mead on Hornby, and Campbell's Gold Honey Farm in Abbotsford. Right. And you know, it is a very ancient fermented beverage, and sometimes it's mixed with herbs, sometimes it's mixed with fruit, and they have different names. There are Norse legends attached to it. Middle Mountain Mead has...
Well, they make a mead of inspiration,
right.
I was reading, on Hornby Island.
Yes.
It's so beautiful on Hornby Island, but so they're making a mead of inspiration
that's
on Hornby Island. And also a green tea, somebody told me. I'm not sure.
Yes, I think there's a green tea flavor to mead. You can do whatever you like.
So is mead high in alcohol?
Not necessarily.
No.
I've tasted a lot at about 12%. And the surprising about mead is that many meads are actually fairly dry. We think of honey as sweet, but no, it's fermented to a relatively dry consistency most times because it's meant to go with food.
Yes,
and
or go before battle.
Or before battle.
Maybe a little sustenance before you do battle in Tribune Bay. There's a Tribune Bay winery, isn't there?
Yeah, there's
Trib Bay on Hornby?
He just opened Tribune, Little Tribune.
Little Tribune. Okay, and Cherry Point and Cowichan. Cowichan means warm, doesn't it?
Yes.
In Indigenous culture, warm place.
Yeah, that's right.
It's like Tuscany over there.
Well, there are James Barber, in fact, used to compare it to Tuscany when the late James Barber, when he had a farm over there.
He sure did.
And was quite passionate about the Tuscan environment. It's not as warm as Tuscany, but I know what he means.
It's the feeling.
It's the feeling.
And the smells and the feeling, not as many olives.
Yeah.
Cherry Point, is he the dairy farmer from Columbia?
That's right.
Cobble Hill?
He's in the Cobble Hill area.
Right.
But Cherry Point was started by a couple from Victoria about 10 or 12 years ago, and they sold it to, after 5 or 6 years, sold to the Cowichan Indian Band, who subsequently, then a couple of years ago, sold it to this gentleman from Columbia.
So moving on up to Courtney. The first winery in the Comox Valley, the Beaufort Vineyard and Estate Winery. What does that mean, estate winery?
Estate means that they make wine only from grapes grown on the estate.
On the estate, period. Oh, that's beautiful. I'd like to live there.
Now there are some people. Yes, that's lovely. There are some people
idyllic,
who use estate and aren't strictly estate, but generally that's what estate should mean. And
it should.
Usually does.
Growing on the premises, so to speak. And when somebody says it's a varietal, there's lots of lingo around wine, and but we don't always. A varietal. What's a varietal?
Well, it's just the name of the grape.
Okay.
A Chardonnay. Chardonnay is the varietal.
Okay.
The grape that's in the bottle.
Sure.
And it's
that's simple.
Nothing more complicated than that.
There's a gentleman named Hans Klitz.
Kiltz.
Kiltz? Is it Kiltz? Hans Kiltz.
Yeah, K-I-L-T-Z.
Kiltz. He's blue grouse, isn't he?
Blue grouse.
Blue grouse. He's got 4 science degrees.
Oh, he's an amazing...
Like an academic.
Yeah, I think he's got 2 PhDs. He's an amazingly educated man. He spent most of his life as a veterinarian in Africa.
Really? And where is his winery?
It's south of Duncan, about 5 or 6 miles, also in the Cowichan Valley.
Right.
He's had it. Hans has now reached the age where he'd like to sell. He's in his 70s, and he's had it on the market for a couple of years, and I'm surprised that no one has snapped it up because it's a good vineyard, it's a good reputation.
Yeah.
He's made excellent wine there.
Be a nice place to live.
We'll
have to do the math on that. The Saskatoon Berry Albertan, and I call him the Saskatoon Berry Albertan, but is it Graziano?
Gord Graziano.
Graziano.
Yes.
What's his winery?
Well,
Not Dragon Hill. No.
No, he does. It's the Saskatoon Berry Farm.
Okay.
And is sort of the winery location. He's got, I think, a different name, but they sell it under Saskatoon Berry Farm.
Okay.
Which is because he makes his wine in his home, and there's really no room for a tasting room, nor does he want a tasting room there. But he makes it with he sparkles Saskatoon and blends it with red wine and sparkles it, and they sell it at the Berry Farm. The Berry Farm is the only Saskatoon berry farm on Vancouver Island.
I didn't even know until I read this that we grow Saskatoon berries in BC.
Well, it's commercial, and I don't know if there's another one. There are Saskatoon, because I tasted a Saskatoon wine at a winery in Cache Creek the other day, so I know they grow wild.
Sure, and a little Loganberry and a little this and a little that. And whose is this? That's a bronze medal winner.
That's a Rocky Creek winery. Blackberry wine. Almost everybody not all, the majority of wineries make blackberry wine because, of course, blackberries grow all over the place. I mean, it started with Cherry Point. The natives were bringing their blackberries to sell in the driveway to the customers. At the end of the day, there's always blackberries left over. And, the wife of the original owner would make pie, and she'd freeze them, she'd make jam, and eventually they got overwhelmed with blackberries, and so they started making wine.
Blackberry wine. Well, thank you for writing this, because I have so much enjoyed the Okanagan tours.
Thank you.
And now we can tour in our own backyard. Go to Langley, go to the Gulf Islands, go to Hornby, all over.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
Pleasure.
Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
John Schreiner's new guide, BC Coastal Wine Tour Guide.